Warmer, high 25.
The following is a special presentation of ABC News and Time Magazine.
Read my lips.
I have sinned.
Keep hope alive. I'm back in the race.
I do.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Just say no.
If there is to be blame, it properly rests here with this president.
Our new Miss America.
Images of the 80s. With Peter Jennings.
It is not very often in television that we invite you to the basement. But this is where the 80s are kept, on videotape, and kept in such abundance that you'll understand how little of it we can show you in a single hour. But on the threshold of a new decade, we do have a good excuse to rummage around down here for a while, collecting those images that may instill some meaning in the decade we've just completed, maybe even give us a clue as to what we will face in the next. 10 years ago, if you'll recall, many of us could hardly wait for the 80s to begin.
The closing of the Dodge main plant will put nearly 3,000 people out of work. Many were caught by surprise when the date was moved up to January.
It is a crisis of confidence. It is a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our national will. Our people are losing that faith.
They seem like bleak times to Americans, an endless list of things gone wrong. The highest inflation in over 30 years, lines for gasoline around the block, the worst nuclear accident in history until then. Americans wondered often if they really were in control of their own destiny. They knew who controlled the price of oil. What some people called international communism seemed to be winning, from Afghanistan to Nicaragua, while America seemed unable or unwilling to affect events. The U.S. Embassy in Tehran, 56 Americans held hostage, and by extension, the whole nation. How badly the country wanted to win one.
There it is. There they are. Captain Michael Ruccioni getting his guys up there.
Jimmy Carter, on the other hand, was associated with failure.
It was my decision to attempt the rescue operation. The responsibility is fully my own.
Enter candidate Ronald Wilson Reagan.
I am paying for this microphone.
The next President of the United States, the Honorable Ronald Reagan of California.
Though his answer sometimes sounded awfully simple, Reagan certainly had the questions right.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
And Reagan they got. And what an impact he would have on the decade. Do you remember his inauguration day? It was hard for us to focus all our attention on Washington because so many of us were thinking about events taking place at an airport in Iran.
Images of the 80s with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Citicorp, because Americans want to succeed, not just survive. And AT&T, the right choice.
Very often in journalism, we get to the end of a single year and say to ourselves, there's never going to be another year like that. And then, of course, there is. As we have pulled together the images which are stored here for a whole decade, we realize just what a rich and spirited time the 80s have been. Also, as you'll see, how some of the divisions in our land were more sharply defined. How in some ways we grew farther apart from one another. If the 70s were the me decade, the 80s may well have been the my decade. It was also a decade of some important American milestones. The 100th anniversary of the Statue of Liberty, the 200th anniversary of the Constitution, and 444 days of Iran.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear
Inauguration Day, 1981.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Day one of the Reagan era. The nation was still holding its breath to see if the Iranians would hold out on Ronald Reagan as they had on Jimmy Carter.
Some 30 minutes ago,
They did not.
the planes bearing our prisoners left Iranian airspace and are now free of air.
Frankfurt is already a hive of activity at Rhineland.
Ronald Reagan had little to do with getting the hostages released, but their return on the first day of his first term was the kind of luck that would endure for much of his presidency.
Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. Let us begin an era of national renewal.
Ronald Reagan believed in symbols. To many, the new president himself symbolized a rebirth of the American spirit. Ronald Reagan loved being the nation's leading man.
Seems like yesterday.
He loved the job.
Here's the pass-around jar.
He loved the role. And then, barely 2 months into his first term,
John W. Hinckley.
The president has a gunshot wound in the left side of the chest.
the president's courage, not to mention his sense of humor, I hope you're all Republicans, he told the doctors, warmed the nation's heart. Even before he had fully recovered, Ronald Reagan was back on television.
Now, let's talk about getting spending and inflation under control and cutting your tax rates.
The image of the ideal president.
Well, it's made out of liver.
I don't like liver.
And it has ground up worm's eyes in it.
In the 80s, television also created the ideal family.
I don't like worm's eyes.
The not so ideal family.
Mom, do you think boobs will affect my pitching? Not this season.
The totally unreal family. And in the realm of the unreal, this is the highest grossing film ever. Sometimes in the 80s, movies encourage people to think about simple solutions. The good guy versus the bad. So when terrorists struck at innocent people, Ronald Reagan ordered the military into action.
Today, we have done what we had to do. If necessary, we shall do it again.
It was the kind of response which at least made a powerful nation feel it was not totally powerless against a form of warfare almost impossible to stop. Throughout much of the Reagan years, the nation embarked on the biggest military buildup in peacetime history.
The Soviets, they have been working, trying to develop this exact kind of system. If they should get it first, it would be a very much more dangerous world.
And then he sent the Marines to keep peace in Lebanon. Lebanon was never a simple place. And when America sided with the Christians in their civil war with the Muslims, the price was high.
There was like, you hear about 1,000 people, it seemed like, screaming, "Help me, God help me."
241 Marines died that day. Their commanders were unprepared for a single man driving a truck full of explosives who was ready to sacrifice himself.
With our mission, there's no way we can have a 100% guarantee.
It wasn't long before the Marines retreated from a place America never understood. After Lebanon, there would be no more complicated military adventures. But 2 days after the bombing in Beirut, the president ordered Americans into a battle they could not lose on the Caribbean island of Grenada.
The Marines came in, stormed into the corridor, yelling, "American soldiers, freeze!"
Was it a valiant rescue of American students? Or was it designed to distract us from the failures of Beirut?
Elements of the 82nd Airborne left Fort Bragg. Our jump went very well.
We have an American!
Ironically, it would not be Ronald Reagan who would take the most decisive military action of the decade, but his successor. Only last week, George Bush sent the U.S. military into Panama to get rid of Manuel Noriega.
We're Army! Airborne! 82nd Airborne Division! Airborne!
At last, Americans found ways to face Vietnam. Rambo went back to the jungle and won. But finally, America stopped tearing itself apart over the real failure in Vietnam. Finally, the men and women who had fought there, often against their wishes, were welcomed home. Finally, those who died there were truly honored. On the subject of honor,
I have sinned against you, my Lord.
I went into the courtroom innocent of the charges against me, and I come out today still innocent of the charges against me.
And he said, I want you to believe you can raise the $8 million. And said, if you don't do this, I will call you home.
I think it was a very fair sentence if I'd been guilty.
I've been totally ethical and proper, as well as lawful in my conduct at all times.
As a matter of fact, I have broken wedding vows. I think I'm probably not alone in that connection.
This will not be like any campaign you've ever seen.
I've done some dumb things, and I'll do dumb things again.
Fame is a vapor, popularity an accident. Those who cheer today may curse tomorrow. Only one thing endures: character.
Well, regardless of what the commissioner said today, I did not bet on baseball.
The matter of Mr. Rose is now closed. No individual is superior to the game.
and so often America was at its best. 1984 was supposed to be George Orwell's year. So much for prophecy.
It's morning again in America. And under the leadership of President Reagan, our country is proud.
Our flag is red, white, and blue, but our nation is rainbow. Red, yellow, brown, black, and white, we're all precious.
You send a powerful signal to all Americans. There are no doors we cannot unlock.
The 80s may not go down as the decade for total equality, but individual Americans were constantly reaching higher and higher and higher.
We have main engine start, 4, 3,